The illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine. Hey, Church Planter, this is Pete Mitchell.
And this is Peyton Jones.
And
today's podcast. What?
Please, I insist. You go on.
No. After you.
No, seriously. You need to do it.
All right, here goes. Today's podcast is brought to you again by the team over at Portable Church. Hey, I've mentioned this before, but if I were going to church plant all over again today, I would actually call these guys up and I would look at all the cool kit that they got to make life for your volunteers much, much easier. Here's the reality. It's going to cost you a little bit more up front. It ain't cheap, but it's well worth it. And here's why. If you invest in Portable Church, you're actually investing into the atmosphere of your church plant. You're telling your volunteers that you value them and you want their life to be a whole heck of a lot easier. PortableChurch.com. Go check them out today.
That's what I'm talking about right there. Get me some Portable Church. In fact, you are about ready to start church planting again, aren't you?
I am, and I'm definitely going to be working with these guys because I've got a weird little model that I'm doing where we're going to start up a bunch of different public space areas and kind of converge. But when we converge together, and I'll talk about that model in future, but when we converge together, I will not go back to the mom and pop way of doing it. I will raise that money. I will beg, borrow, and steal, but I will make sure that we got the kit because it makes a huge difference. Your setup literally goes from like an hour to an hour and a half to like 30 minutes. And everything's, this is the OCD in me. Everything's in its like tight little box and you know where everything goes. It's like Transformers. You ever seen Transformers where like all like square and tiny and compact and then it goes burp, 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 and then it comes out? I'm all for that Transformer feeling in my church plant.
So can I give them a new tagline?
Yeah.
Portable Church. More than meets the eye.
That's so good. Maybe we should let you do the commercial because I told the guy last week after you had to go, I'll never let Pete touch a commercial again, but I now stand corrected. I'm thinking out for them, right? It's the marketer in me. More than meets the eye. And you know I'm going to bring that up from now on.
Oh, my gosh.
More than meets the eye.
Hey.
And only our listeners will know that inside joke.
We made MoGive a household name in church planters. We will do the same for Portable Church. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely, man. Yeah,
hey.
And they're cool guys, too. We actually had breakfast with them a couple years ago. Yeah. Remember?
Yeah, I do.
In Huntington Beach. That was kind of cool. They took us out to breakfast. I like those guys.
So, got kind of an interesting story for you.
Okay. By the way, though, I just want to say I was dropping a hint that we want more breakfast. But anyways, go on with your story.
So when I was in high school, I had 2 knee operations. I have a condition called osteochondritis. It's where part of the bone in the knee dies. Bone.
I know the osteo part.
Right. Yeah, good. It's where
inflammation of something.
It's where part of the bone dies, breaks off, and then it's just floating around there in your kneecap. And, oh yeah, so it's tearing everything up.
That's terrible, dude.
Well, the first surgery, because I was so young, I mean, I was probably a junior in high school, they drilled into the bone and tried to plant these pieces of bone back in, hoping that maybe blood would go to them and they'd start growing again. So that way I'd have a stronger knee. Didn't work. So second surgery, they went in there, took it out. I was told I'm missing like 30 to 50% of the weight-bearing surface. Don't know if it's real or not. I don't know. These guys just make up terms. They're doctors. They can say whatever they want. No one has a clue. But they did tell me that I'd have to have a total knee replacement by the time I was 40. And I don't think they realized just how lazy one man could be because I'm like, yeah, I'm 42. I don't need a knee replacement. I'm just as good as I ever was. Right. Like, until last Friday.
Uh-oh.
Last Friday, for no reason, literally at all, my knee is shot and I am back to barely able to walk, and that's only with a cane. I kid you not. I can barely like stand. I can't walk. I was like, I cannot walk Luke to school this morning. There's no way I can do that.
Are you serious, dude?
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's not cool.
I know, right? So Petey's got a
joke now.
I gotta,
you know Jerry McCarty, right?
Yeah.
So when I first met Jerry, I was speaking at a Pentecostal conference. He had reached out to me and he'd emailed me about a year before. And so he reaches back out and I said, hey, I'm going to actually be on the East Coast and be in Virginia speaking at a big Pentecostal denominational conference. And he goes, well, I'll drive down there and I'll come see you. So he comes down. He's on a cane. Like he can barely walk. Like he's in so much pain. And dude, on the way to the airport, no joke now, the guy who took me to the airport, Jerry said, hey, can I hop in? We can keep talking. Sure. No problem. So I go to the bathroom. I come back. This guy's laying hands on Jerry, praying for him, heals him.
No.
Like, right there, dude.
Okay. Where is he?
He's in Virginia. I can put you in touch with him.
I would rather fly there than go under the knife.
Well, all I'm saying is you need to talk to my homeboy in Virginia, Mr. Brian.
Dude,
you need to talk to him.
I'm there. I'm there.
All right. All right, brother.
It's pretty bad, actually.
Dude, that sucks. I did not know. I mean, I knew you were bad to the bone, but I did not know you were bad to the bone.
Bad to the missing bone, huh? That's how bad I am.
Dude. Wow. Yeah. Dude, that sucks, man. I'm actually really sad to hear that.
Yeah, I'm really sad to experience that. I'm really sad because, see, here's the part where now I'm going to be like concerned because of Obamacare.
Oh, yeah.
Our rates went through the roof and we never go to the doctor. So I'm on one of those medical share plans like Christian Heritage Medical Share. I don't know what it's called, right? And I'm like, oh man, dude, like, how is this going to work? I don't know how it works. I mean, cause it's not technically insurance.
It doesn't. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, wait. We take that back. If you want to be a sponsor, come on board. No,
I'm going to find out if it works because, I mean, this can't count as a pre-existing condition. I have literally not been to the doctor in 20 years for this.
Yeah.
So, come on. That's not pre-existing.
Pete, I got a question for you, man. I keep getting all these things this is off topic. Sorry. I keep getting all these things in the mail that are like, hey, and I meant to ask you about this last week. You know how like you're getting all this stuff from all these companies like Zoom and, hey, we've updated our privacy policy. I know there's like a law in Europe. Yeah. Does that affect like churches and ministries?
Everything as far as I know.
Okay. I'm just wondering because I'm thinking, man, everybody running a 501c3, which counts church planners. I'm wondering if we got to pay attention to that. Like,
I would not be surprised.
I have a European person on my list, and maybe now I got to do all these.
And
things.
Here's the thing, too, man. You got to look at the fact that people like to target certain types of businesses, and you can bet there's enough disgruntled former church members got molested by some priest somewhere where they want to go after every church they can find. And you got to be on top of all that stuff all the time. Totally.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, dude.
Like, did I tell you about the, so I have this software program that I built out called SMS Conversations. If you've gone through one of our webinars, you've probably gotten a text message from me. And, so what happens is it texts people out, and then when they reply back, I'm notified of their reply and I can enter a conversation with them. That's why it's called SMS Conversations. That's what it's designed to do. And, did I tell you about this? What happened with the guy?
No.
Okay. So I've got an inner circle for real estate agents that I do. And we give this program to all of them for them to use. And this guy goes out and buys a spam list of all the people in his neighborhood and starts spam texting them. Hey, do you want a home valuation? I mean, imagine what would happen if your cell phone became your email inbox. How annoying would that be? Right. So this is not the stuff that we teach at all. Well, he actually didn't send out that many texts, but he ends up getting one of the people who we did text is an attorney who's like, I'm suing you. I'm doing a class action lawsuit. I'm coming after you. I'm coming after Keller Williams. You know, because Keller Williams,
after everyone you love.
Yeah, well, and so this guy is like freaking out. You know, the fine is $15,000 a text, and I'm like, no, because then this gets back to my partner Debbie, and Debbie's like freaking out. And I go, first of all, we're not the phone carrier. That's this other company. Right. We just created this little piece to help people, you know, connect the two. And besides that, it's not like this guy knows about us, right? So what she's afraid is this real estate agent's going to get sued and he's going to turn around and sue us. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not worried about it. Because I'm like, first of all, the $15,000 per text, that's if the FTC comes after you. The FTC ain't coming after this guy, some Joe Schmo realtor in the middle of Florida who like texted 700 neighbors. I go, they're not going after that guy for that. So first of all, that's not going to happen. And secondly, if it did, it's not like he did any of the stuff we told him to do. Like he literally did the exact opposite of everything we tell him to do.
Right.
So I had to deal with that a lot, trying to walk my client down off the cliff.
Well, Pete, this is why you ought to get Simplify Church at simplifychurch.com. I figure we might as well do this now, right? It's a good segue.
Segue right on in. But my point in all of that is you do need to be aware of the laws in your area, because if you're a church doing stuff like that, there are enough people who will complain. Like the only way this guy could get a class action lawsuit, he literally has to go around to all the neighbors, find ones that actually got the text, get them to show that they had damages because he texted them. It's like it would never happen. It literally would never happen. But you know, here's the thing about attorneys, and I feel for all of you attorneys who listen, they make money off of other people's misery. Like that's their sole job. So what do you do when you got no clients, but you got an attorney's license? You find someone to sue. That's what you do. That's how you make money.
It's funny because there is a very famous Christian speaker who made money that way. I know somebody who knew him in his lawyer days.
Oh no, really?
Oh yeah, no. I'm just going to stop right there. I'm just going to back away from that.
Wow. Who was it? It was Rick Warren, wasn't it? It was Rick Warren. He was an attorney.
Rick Warren didn't pass the bar. Now, he's been to the moon. I mean, he's done everything else, but he hasn't passed the bar.
Hey, I've never passed a bar in my life.
Taxi cab.
I've never passed a bar in my life. Wait, sorry, wrong podcast. Wrong podcast. Oh my gosh.
And the funny thing is you're not a heavy drinker. That's the funny thing. But no one would know that. They would just judge you. Alas. Yeah. It's hard being Pete Mitchell's friend.
I did have to answer that question yesterday. I can't tell you what the test was, not for another 3-4 weeks until I get the results back. But I did have to answer, how much alcohol do you consume?
Well, you know, it's funny, man, because I was texting a friend this week, and I had to text him, are you drinking? Like, what's wrong with you right now? So
was he? What was his answer?
He said no, but I think he denied it.
Nice. No, for my answer, just in case anyone was wondering.
Yes. It just negates everything that you just texted, right?
My answer, in case anyone was wondering, was, when it's not barbecue season, I'm about a 1 to 2 beer a month kind of guy. But when it is barbecue season, I do like to have a beverage while I'm barbecuing. So that could be 1 to 2 beers a week. I do increase a bit.
Just like Dad did. Oh, wait. Dad was a Baptist pastor. No.
One of those Baptist pastors.
So, hey, let's get this gravy train a moving.
Cool. You know what? I should actually open up the soundboard.
I have the best sound clips for you, and I so want to play them.
What are they about?
What if I share with you a Dropbox right now?
No, I'm not going to add it. Not
in real time, everybody. Real time. This is how we do.
It's still not getting added.
I have Karate Man. I'm just saying. I have Karate Man. I got Karate Man for you.
That's awesome, man. I'm really happy for you.
Karate Man. Oh, you know what I want? I find myself at weird moments driving down the road thinking, I want this soundbite for the podcast. And what's funny is we totally underutilize our soundbites.
Here's my favorite soundbite.
Pete Mitchell is my pastor. Wise in the use of the force. He is.
I'm just saying.
What is wrong with that one? That one, it doesn't sound good.
No, it sounds like someone's like got a burp, but is like trying to get out of line instead.
Pete Mitchell, my pastor, is.
Was that better?
No.
Oh, man. So here's a one, and see if you can tell what film this is from. This is the one I found myself thinking about this morning driving down the road. You want a gummy bear? I've got one in my pocket, so it's all warm and gushy. Ding, ding, ding.
I don't have a clue.
Ding, ding. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, baby.
Oh.
Chicka chicka, boom, boom. Oh, yeah. Chicka chicka. Remember?
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
It's the best, man. The principal gets on the bus and sits next to that girl with the glasses. She asks him if he wants a gummy bear. It's classic cinema history.
I didn't. I mean, I saw it. I've seen it several times, but I couldn't tell you much about that movie.
Oh, Pete Mitchell. Come on now.
How about what movie is this from? Chicks will go sterile just looking at you. I was kind of hoping you'd know because I'm not 100%.
Oh, dang.
I think it's Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Maybe.
Let's do a Google search.
But I will tell you this. I quote that movie. I do not endorse that movie. I do not approve of that movie. But I saw that movie before I was a Christian, and I constantly say, hey, I totally know that dude. I quote that one all the time. Pete's a dude. There's some great quotes out of that movie.
Yeah, so I just Googled chicks will go sterile just looking at you, and you know what the number one result is that comes up?
Do I want to know?
I don't know what it is, but I'll read you.
Time Bandits?
It says, sterile rooster, backyardchickens.com. So I'm kind of afraid to go any further on that.
Stay out of that dark place on the internet.
But there's actually a website called backyardchickens.com.
This, by the way, is why I don't get asked to speak at more conferences. This is why, Pete, I'm just telling you, I blame Smack Talk, dang it. This is why Daniel M. gets invited to all the conferences. I'm just saying. Should we ask that Peyton Jones guy? No. I've heard Smack Talk. Don't have. But I'll tell you where I am speaking. That was a segue. You want to know where I'm speaking coming up?
Please, tell us. Where are you speaking?
June 9th, I am speaking at the Pacific Coast Japanese Conference.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, Better Off Dead. Better Off Dead. That's what it was.
Oh, no way. I should have known that one. Because I knew the quote.
Here's the whole line. You make a gnarly run like that, and girls will get sterile just looking at you. So
the K10, baby. Yeah. The K10. That's what he's talking about.
Yep. And I did find that on backyardchickens.com. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't. But okay, so we should actually get on with the meat and potatoes of the podcast. Doc, kick us off.
Great Scott! It's time for this week's topic.
Let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
So, Mr. Jones, what is today's topic?
Today's topic is how should we engage lost people around us? We live in an age of Twitter and Facebook. And what I'm noticing nowadays is most people have the gift of snark, right? If you're going to make some tweety tweet or quotable quote, a lot of times it's snarkiness or it's sarcasm. And, it doesn't really And I'm not just talking about social media. I'm just saying, like, we have an emerging culture of communication now that's not doing Christianity any favors, to be frank. Tweets aren't really long enough to get the gospel out. And unfortunately, it often becomes a liability. At least that's what I'm finding. I mean, the drunk uncles are always at the party on social media saying that the earth is flat. And Pete,
hey,
I'm just going to stop you right there.
I'm just saying you can't show me a real picture that shows a round earth in it. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, even Steve-O has been up in a jet and has seen that the earth is round. If Steve-O believes it, dang it, it's good enough for me. It's done and dusted. Steve-O is a scientist, baby, in his own way. But here's the deal. We live in a culture that has pretty much moved on from God. And so recently I was back in Wales, and nothing kind of fires me up for the gospel than being in Wales, where people just have no clue. So one of my good friends there is the head of something called the Street Pastors. And the Street Pastors was an organization that is kind of big in the UK because you have a lot of binge culture drinking where people are out on the streets late Friday, Saturday nights, all into the night. Like, they'll build like hourly rate motels. People, like, Americans have no concept of this. Like, they'll block off the street because there's so many drunk people walking in the street that they have to barricade the roads and stop all traffic on Friday and Saturday nights. It's a binge drinking culture. Barry Waters will tell you all about it. You can't be out on the street safely after about 10 p.m. Unless you want to run a really big risk of getting in a fight. Girls that have had too much to drink frequently get raped. They get taken advantage of. So one of the things that I was able to do in Swansea was I joined a committee of pastors where we helped bring something to the streets of Swansea. That's the last town I was pastoring in, called Street Pastors. And all street pastors do is, and this is the segue, this isn't the topic, but all street pastors do is they're a presence there. They have a jacket. They kind of, in a weird way, they kind of have like a jacket and like a baseball hat. Kind of makes you a little bit like a cop or some kind of like drug enforcement. But what you're there doing is you're there serving people. So you've got waters, you've got flip flops, because women, when they're drunk, they might break a heel and they're staggering around with there's broken bottles and trash all over the street. I wish I could explain to you the mayhem. Like, you can't.
We interviewed Nigel in one of the very first episodes because I remember us talking to him about it. And he said the biggest people that they had an impact on were not the drunks, because they were too drunk to even know that someone was helping them. But it was the bartenders and the bouncers and the wait staff that they ended up having the biggest influence on.
Right. Because what ends up happening, like, you're helping girls get safely in a taxi cab. You're just there, and people will often turn and say, why are you guys here? Well, we love God, and God loves you guys, and just want to make sure you're safe tonight. And you're not supposed to full on out and out share the gospel. You can't pitch. It's not what your presence is there for. You are there to serve, and they will say, if you do have a gospel conversation, that's okay, but you're not there to street preach. You're not there. You are there to keep people safe. And it ends up kind of almost being a, like I said, people engaging. You can have like an hour, 2 hour long conversation, but you literally are there to be a presence and a witness. And it's really like, I got the statistic on how much crime had gone down from my buddy Andy. Can't remember what it was, but it was staggering. He just shared it with me that since the year that we brought that to the city, that it was, it was crazy. It was something like, I want to say it was like in 80-something%, a certain crime, I can't remember what crime it was, had gone down. Might have been rape or whatever on those nights. But people don't understand. Like, they just don't understand. And I remember once posting that on Facebook, and someone I know called me a liar. They're like, you're lying. There's no way. So I had to there's a famous photojournalist.
Yeah,
a famous series that a photojournalist from Poland took of the streets of Kharkiv, which is the next biggest city. And there, you have to see it to believe it. Like people covered in blood from fire. Like it's just crazy. It's like the Wild West out there. So anyways, I was talking with my buddy Andy, who heads that. He was a part of our church there. And as we chatted, we were just talking. I kind of had like a mind-blowing moment where he said, you know, the average person I'm talking to, I say something about God and they go, don't need him. Don't think about him. And as we got to chatting, that's just kind of where the apostolic in me thrives. And as we started talking, we just started talking about how do you reach people that are so far beyond, as a culture, and American culture is getting like this. What should our posture be? What should our conversation be? Where do we start with someone who says, I don't believe your Bible. I don't believe, in anything you're saying. I think this is a comfort religion, like a comfort food for your soul, makes you feel better. And that's about it. Reminds you of your childhood or your home. But I don't believe any of this. Where do we start with them? And what do we do? So that was kind of the conversation that we had. And I thought, man, that would make a great topic for us to cover on this podcast.
So let's do. Where do you start?
Well, cool. Well, let me just pitch it so it's not a monologue here. Let me ask you about your situation with Wayne. You know, how did that all come about?
Well, I got to take advantage of a downtime in his life.
And everybody has those, let's be fair.
Yeah, he had just pled guilty to a crime, unfortunately, that he hadn't committed. But for those of you that have heard the story, I won't rehash it. But in our justice system, you're toast. I mean, if prosecutors want to get you, you're toast. And they basically, after years of having this indictment against him, bled out all of his money till he was down to the public defender. And public defenders don't give a rip about you at all. To them, you're a number. Move on to the next. And he basically was like, okay, I have to take a deal. If I don't take a deal and we go to trial, I'm going to lose. And I'm going to be looking at, 12 to 15 years. So he took a deal, and unfortunately, in taking a deal, you're now a felon. So he's not a violent offender or anything. It was all white-collar stuff. And so he didn't have to report to jail for like a year or something after they took the deal. And as soon as he took the deal and pled guilty, his boss fired him. And his boss was having a bad run at business anyway and was probably looking for an excuse to get rid of him. But he's like, well, now that you've officially taken a deal, I got to let you go. So that was his excuse to fire him. And you and I needed some work for the Bivo Inner Circle, cha-ching, which you can find all about at BivoInnerCircle.com. And we needed a bunch of our interviews that we had done transcribed and cleaned up. The way that we talk is not the way that we read. So we had these great transcripts, but they need to be cleaned up and put into a more conversational fashion that people can read easier. And so I went to you and I said, hey, my buddy over here needs a little bit of work. He's totally anal when it comes to grammar and spelling. He's like perfect for this. But he's also not saved. Do you have a problem with him doing this? And I'll probably want you to reread it to make sure that he didn't accidentally change the meaning of anything, because he wouldn't have intentionally changed anything. But,
right.
There were many a times when he was like, yeah, I Googled this word and there really is a word like this. I've never heard it before, right? Because we have our own vocabulary in Christianese, if you will.
Right.
And so imagine this, an unsaved guy, his first task is he has to read interviews with like Alan Hirsch, Brian Sanders, Dave Ferguson, like
Hugh Halter.
Of all the people you could have someone forced to read who's not saved. Like it was perfect, right? And so I mean that's kind of what started. I mean, he's always known I was Christian and whatnot. And then so it grew from there, and I said, hey, look, man, I need another assistant. you know, and I'll tell you right off the bat, I'm a jerk to work for. So
Right.
I don't know that it's going to work. And the friendship's more important than the working relationship. And at first it was very much, there was a lot of pride on his side. He was like, look, you know, I don't want someone just giving me a handout of a job, but at the same time he needed the work.
Right.
So, he ended up taking it. And, that was in May of last year. And he reported to, jail up in Oregon, September of last year. So whatever that is, 3-4 months. He worked for me basically full time, about 30 hours a week. And I would say the bulk of our days during that time were conversations about God in one fashion or another. It was not actually getting work done. In fact, it was a horrible employer relationship because like nothing got done. But I didn't care either. I mean, I would have hired him full time if it meant we just got to have gospel conversations. But it, like, all this stuff sparked questions, you know, in his mind. Like, I still remember one of the first conversations we had when I go, well, Jesus is God. And he goes, well, Jesus is the Son of God. And I'm like, oh, okay, I got to explain this one. Great. Of all things I got to explain, thanks for the Trinity, God. You know, I can barely understand that one myself. So, I mean, it turns out he had, somewhat of a Christian upbringing in that his parents believed in God, but I don't believe that they lived out the life because apparently he and his brother got beat all the time.
Oh gosh.
You know, but he definitely, like you and I talked, he definitely had problems with, young earth. You know, he's a very intelligent person. So he's read a lot of the studies on evolution, on the age of the universe and stuff like that, and just goes, these Christians are crazy. I mean, they're totally denying all of this evidence that's out there. And so, I mean, we had to have conversations about all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, in one sense, I mean, you know, what the world has kind of done. And if you go back and you study the history of evolution, there was a motive. I'm not saying the theory of evolution was a crime, but what I'm saying is it pre-existed Charles Darwin. So Charles Darwin's grandfather was in something called the Lunar Society. That basically they tried to imagine how the world came about.
Did they think
God.
the moon was hollow? And that it was a spaceship?
It was a space station. Yes. That's why the very first piece of film ever made was about that. It's an old French film. You've seen it with the rocket sticking on the moon's eye.
I like it.
Yeah. I totally made that up, by the way. The film was the first film ever made, but and by the way, guy who, Lord Talbot was the first guy, Port Talbot, Wales, to photograph the moon. But that means nothing. But I lived on that guy's property. So I just had to throw that in.
I'm very happy for you.
While we're on tangents, I just figured I'd see your tangent and I'd raise you one. But here's the reality is that, you know, Charles Lyell was the geologist who first said, hey, I believe in something called uniformitarianism. In other words, I believe that things are always as they've been. You just millions of years, we can see sedimentation occurring. What we see as a strata in the earth is billions of years of it. And I'm not a young earther, guys. I'm just not. You know, I believe in an older earth. But, you know, I've been a flag carrying member of both societies. And
let me just throw this in there. One of the things that made our conversations go so well is for myself, because of everything that you and I have done together, I've removed my axe. I don't need to grind it, right?
Right.
And so I brought up Don Stoner. I'm like, this is a hardcore Christian dude who believes in theistic evolution. And he's a wicked smart scientist who's written a book on Einstein's theory of relativity. And I'm like, but he's a hardcore Christian, like God, Jesus, the whole deal, right? I mean, he does not waver from that. I'm like, if a guy can be that hardcore of a Christian and a scientist and believe in a theistic evolution, then I just would bring him up. I'm like, well, this is what this guy believes.
That's it.
And I didn't say I believed it.
Does.
I just was like, this is the deal. There's some people who believe this. It's not a salvation issue. And,
what it immediately does is it takes the things out, because it's the fallacy of the false middle. There's this idea that it has to be this or that. And so you either believe in God and accept, the earth is 6,000 years old, according to Archbishop Usher, or you accept that the earth is billions of years old. You can come at it and say, guys, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm sure our theory today is not, but you can come at it. You can just completely take the teeth out of that argument. And that's what I was kind of getting at, is there is a motive. I mean, going back to the history of evolution, whether it's true or whether billions of years old, if evolution were true, God made it. I mean, that's just what a person of faith is always going to say. And that's, to me, I'm not threatened by science. If I never believe that they have it right anyways, but if it were, I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever. I do believe the word, and I do believe the Bible. However, the Bible is written in poetic form in those first 2 chapters. The order in which those days are created has to be the order. You couldn't take any of those days out of order. Now you got all these different theories, but my point is you can play with all of that, but as soon as you do exactly what you said, Pete, and that is you strip them of that argument. And the reason I'm saying that's important is because really the motive behind all of that, including a couple things like Stephen Hawking, getting ready to read his book, A Brief History of Time, he tried to come up with a theory, and apparently he succeeded. I haven't read the book, so I don't know quite what it is, but the apparent idea that the universe could have made itself. That's what his theory was that made him kind of famous. So there's, again, we don't need God. Then you have Richard Dawkins, who comes along. He is a brilliant scientist, but he's a terrible theologian. So many of his arguments are straw men. And he's not a philosopher either. He kind of needs to stick to his own deal, because all he does is bash Christianity and say Christianity's has made the earth a worse place, and science and the absence of God makes it better. Of course, not counting the fact that, under communism and Nietzsche and all these other ideologies, we've seen more murders under the name of atheism in the 20th century than anything with all the other centuries combined that Christianity was ever responsible for, just this last 100 years alone. So the facts aren't on the side of people. But again, chaos theory is what Richard Dawkins came up with, which is the idea that things could randomly mutate and eventually lead to an improvement in biology rather than mutations which are damaging to the species. So here at each point, you see these guys that come up with these theories, and it's something that's applauded, and yay, and why? Why is this such? Because it says we don't need God. And Dawkins was the guy who is extremely honest about it. On the SS Beagle, Charles Darwin, he was a guy who had failed in his attempt to get into the ministry. He had an axe to grind. He wrote in his journals, which were never meant to be public, that he felt that he had struck a dagger straight into the heart of God with when he published his book. Charles Lyell wrote some things that were very antagonistic towards God. These were not guys that were just, they were objective and, oh man, I feel kind of like when the guy who wrote Melville, when he wrote Moby Dick, he said, I've written an evil book. It actually turned out to be a rad book. It's not evil at all. But he felt it was kind of blasphemous. These guys weren't horrified. They were glad. They felt we did it. We championed something. So all I'm saying in this is that this is the same thing that happens every time you get in a conversation. It's a bulletproof vest against the gospel. Now, what you've got to do is you've got to, like Pete was saying, reach up behind their argument and just unfasten the bulletproof vest. So it falls down and say, hey, and here's why. Because we talked about this on one of our Abandoned Brothers calls, Pete. that one of the geniuses of sharing the gospel is that you don't have to answer and wrangle all these little questions. We're trying to get to the big question, right? Big question is who you are before God. And, you know, where are you at with the claims of Jesus? Where are you at with the gospel itself? And so to try to get around, you know, having to listen to the gospel, it's a conversation killer. It would be like when the sales guy, you know, I'm walking through the mall and he says, "Hey, you want to buy some perfume for your lady?" And I go, "I hate women." You know, that's a way to shut that down, right? That's what they're doing, right? They're immediately, they don't want the sales pitch. They don't want to, they don't want to be vulnerable.
You don't
so
want
they
me,
shut it down.
You don't want me taking that out as a soundbite, right?
Yeah, that would be bad. That would be very bad. Be very bad for me. I'm married to a woman and I'm raising 2 women. Yeah. So that would be bad.
Yeah, no, but
so
I'm
even
with
the
you.
dog would be mad at me. The dog's a girl.
I'm with you on that. I mean, and that's how our conversations went. But I was just in the unique position. Like I grew up a young earther. I don't personally believe in evolution. I think evolution's got too many holes. No. It doesn't make, even theistic evolution doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, nor me. I'm not an evolutionist.
But that doesn't, I mean, I still look at it and go, look, I don't know how God did what he did, but I know that God did it. And I'm cool with that. And like, even, well, I mean, part of the young earth, old earth thing, you and I have talked about this, and we've talked about it on the podcast and on the Band of Brothers. In my study of quantum physics, basically what you learn there is that it's entirely possible to have an earth created in 7 days about 6,000 years ago and it to be over 13 billion years old. Like in quantum physics, both of those theories are entirely possible at the exact same time. And I know that makes no sense to say as a statement until you study quantum physics and you're like, oh man, it's actually entirely possible. So it's one of the reasons I don't have a problem with young earthers or old earthers. Because in quantum physics, they're not actually theories that are opposed to each other. In quantum physics, both of those can happen simultaneously. It's totally mind-boggling and it makes no sense. I'm just saying it's possible. So that's why for me, I don't have these, like I said before, these acts that I got to grind and I got to be on the winning side of this. And I know a lot of people have a problem with this, but even in my recent studies of a worldwide flood, when you actually read the biblical account, a worldwide flood does not fit what the Bible actually says. A worldwide, as far as where all the people were flood, actually does fit what the Bible specifically says. And so I think there are issues at times with the interpretation. Of the original text, not what was originally intended. But now we've developed these whole theories that, and you're not an evangelical if you don't believe in a rapture, and if you don't believe in, and it's like, well, wait a second here. Wait, are we adding to the gospel now? Now we have to believe in these things in order to come to salvation? Because I don't remember reading that.
Oh, funny though, because Don Stoner years ago, it was so funny the way I met him.
I remember this.
Yeah. He goes, "What do you think of that Don Stoner guy?" And I had read one of his books. I said, "I think he's heretical." And the guy goes, "And you should tell this guy." He pulls his wallet out, pulls his driver's license out, and hands it to me. I didn't know I was talking to Don Stoner. That was quite a lesson for me to learn. But it was great because he ended up in Refuge Long Beach. We became good friends after that, and I respect the crap out of that guy. So it's funny. We brought him to one of our outreaches at one in the gay coffee house where we did the open mic night. And we were remember when everybody's talking about the Mayan calendar?
Oh, yeah.
We did an event on that, and it was rad, man. We had killer artwork for that. That was a great night. But we had Don there as like the secret weapon, dude. Like that dude knew so much about that stuff. And nobody was going to like read the article in People and saying it like, it was amazing. Like, you get Don Stoner in a room and he is an apologist to the core.
Yeah.
And he can, and here's the thing, again, going back to it, I think we need to stick to the main issues. Kind of like Jesus with the woman at the well. She keeps throwing out all these side issues like, hey, you Jews say that we Samaritans should worship in Jerusalem, but we worship on this hill. And he gets back to it. He says, hey, look, Father's seeking those that will worship him in spirit and truth. Like, he just sidesteps that whole, where is the right, because, the Jews believed you could only worship God in Jerusalem where the temple was. And so, but Jesus sidesteps it, like at each turn, he just keeps to the main issue and will not allow her to sidestep. And so when I was talking with my buddy recently, we were chatting and he was saying, well, like, what do you do? Like, what do you say? And this is the golden rule for me with evangelism. If you get one thing out of this conversation that you can take with you for the rest of your life, is always find the common ground.
Yeah. So
this is what I learned to do as a missionary. When I first went to Wales, Matrix was huge. I would talk to people about that movie, just geek. I was working in a factory. I would geek out. I'd talk to people on the streets. I'd do pub and nightclub outreach. That was crazy. And I would talk to people and I would just ask them, what do you think of The Matrix? And they'd be like, oh, it's a brilliant film, mate. Oh, blah, blah, you American? Yeah. Blah, blah. Oh man, that movie, blah, blah. And we just talk. And I'd say, how do you know that you're not caught up in something like that? And we would start talking about God. And it's one of those, people love to talk about that stuff. Not God, but they love to, kind of geek out about things that are interesting. So I would always find the common ground. Well, in answer to my buddy who's a street pastor, he goes, I just don't know what to say when someone says something like that. And I would say, well, for me, I would start with something like, well, God's, you probably, when they say, oh, I don't see God, that was what kicked off. He goes, I don't see him. He's not here. I don't need him, and what sparked me in that was, well, actually, you do see him. Have you ever realized you've been looking at something and you don't realize that you've been looking at, you just thought you weren't seeing something, but you're seeing something the whole time. And so my buddy and I started talking. I said, the Bible says every time you look at creation, you're seeing God. Every time somebody does something nice for somebody that kind of blows you away, you're seeing a piece of God there. Man was made in God's image. Like, this is what's called natural theology, which is what the Puritans, they were pretty big on it, actually, where you would talk about where you find God in nature, in natural revelation, things you can see without needing the Holy Spirit. Now, you're not going to be awoken to these things without the Holy Spirit, but that's where you come in, right? The Holy Spirit's with you. So what you're able to do is you're able to share from natural revelation, which would be things like, mate, how did you feel when, you can tell I'm in British mode right now, but what did you feel when your baby was born? Didn't you feel something incredible? Oh man, yeah, you talk to anybody about when their baby was born, and you tell them that's God. We even went so far as to talk, my buddy, he's a funny dude. He loves his sex. He goes, what about sex? I'm like, dude, totally. Like, think about orgasm. It didn't have to be like that. But everything that you taste, every good and perfect gift is from above. Everything that we enjoy is from above. And I tell you who was big on this was C.S. Lewis. Lewis was huge on this. Lewis had this thing where he would basically, if you ever get a chance, guys, and you haven't, read Mere Christianity. Lewis argues a lot in reverse. He's talking to a totally secularized society, and he starts with what they know. He starts with the common ground, and he works backwards, reasoning with them, right, into a Christian worldview, because that was Lewis's deal. He realized at a certain point that if his Christian, or if his worldview was so right, why was it not working for anyone he knew? And why were the Christians he knew seeming to be more joyous, more content people? Now, he lived in Britain. He didn't live in America right now, where we're so jacked up and confused, where I don't think Americans even know what Christianity is. Britain hasn't really suffered with that problem quite like we have. When Britain went in the decline, they went liberal. It went out like a kind of like a puff of smoke, but there you had the evangelicals that held true. And they weren't the evangelicals like what we have. When we say evangelicals here, we often mean fundamentalists, the ones that get really bad press. Usually we're saying fundamentalists, and America doesn't know how to distinguish between the two. And if evangelical is just someone who says, I just believe in the message of the Bible, you know? So here's the deal. If you can talk to people and point out areas where they've already seen God, and they just haven't realized it, that is a very, very powerful argument that you can start from. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does, because, I mean, one of my arguments that I kept coming back to with Wayne in our conversations is I can believe these other things because the story of Jesus makes sense and is solid to me. You know, everything from the death to the resurrection, the evidence for that, the evidence in the disciples' lives of, you know, here, we think we got the Messiah. Oh, the Messiah's dead. Dude, we're out. To all of a sudden, wait a second. No, there he is. And now they're like on fire. Like it doesn't make any sense unless they actually saw Jesus after he had died. Like none of it makes any sense unless they saw him after he had died. And so I kept coming back to him. I and we kept going over those arguments and, you know, looking at Paul as a great example, perhaps one of the best examples. This dude was out killing the Christians.
Right.
And then he has the Damascus Road experience, and all of a sudden he's like the number one dude out there, like spreading the gospel like no one's business. I'm like, think about that. That doesn't make any sense. Like you wouldn't give up a life of privilege to be that guy, to be beaten, stoned, you know, everything that happened to him. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. And because I can believe in that, I can believe in the story that God put on flesh, came down to earth, walked the earth, died, and was risen again. Because I can believe in that, I don't have a problem with the stories in the Old Testament.
Preach it, brother, preach it.
I'm just saying, I'm like, and that's what we keep coming back to. I go, you know, the whole thing with Noah and the ark. Yeah, okay, I've seen the evidence where maybe it wasn't a complete worldwide flood. Maybe that one word we did not quite interpret correctly, but whether it was or it wasn't kind of doesn't matter because I can believe this over here. So what's the point of that? You know, what was the point that God was telling in that story?
Right.
And
that would be a great topic is to get on to, at some point in the podcast is biblical interpretation, where sometimes we hold on to our interpretation of the Bible as if it is the truth of the Word of God itself. And I know that when we get to heaven, God's going to be like, hey, you guys were kind of embarrassing when you said, you know, like, that's not what I was saying. And that's where I think good biblical scholarship, I'm not talking about the stuff that's like, oh, we can't believe any of this stuff. Like evangelical scholarship has really come a long way. When I got my MA, there were some intelligent dudes. And that's one of the things I love to bring out when I'm talking to people is how many super intelligent people believe. Like you mentioned scientists. Years ago, National Geographic, it must have been 2005, ran a series of articles and it caused an uproar because I was subscribing to National Geographic back then. And in the following months, people were still ranting about it, how wrong it was that they did this series of articles. And I still have it somewhere here, a series of articles on scientists who believed in God. And they weren't wackos. They just were people that were very renowned scientists who believed in God, and they were living people, you know, at the height of their field. And oh man, it got people so mad. And this is where I often point out to people, and they're, you know, you idiots and blah, blah. I'm like, look, you want to tell me J.R.R. Tolkien was an idiot? You want to, my daughter, this is go to work with Daddy Day, and my daughter's in the room. So, hey, quiet or I'll spank you. No, just joking. That's a joke. I don't hit my kids ever. We don't spank in the Jones house. That's just a bad joke. So here's the deal.
That can be bad on so many levels.
I know, right? So here's the deal: is you've got basically like C.S. Lewis, Tolkien. These are very intelligent people who literally believe in the Bible and believe in the gospel. And so it's not a question of intelligence. And you can go throughout history and find people that they had options to believe other things and just didn't, but they were evidentialists. They believed in evidence. But, faith is that confidence of things not seen. You never, there's one thing you never want to do. You never want to reduce the faith to something I can convince you of by evidence. God never made it that way. Otherwise, we would pick the golden link in the chain and say, here's the one piece of evidence that will turn everyone into a Christian. He didn't give us that. He did make it faith. And he made it faith for a reason, because it involves him. It involves surrender. It involves having your eyes open divinely. It all goes back to him. And so, we need to always keep that in mind that, you can sow, you can reap, you can harvest, but God alone gives that increase. And that's probably a good place for us to stop today.
Mic drop.
Boom. And since we already did simplifiedchurch.com, there's no reason to repeat simplifiedchurch.com. Just head over to simplifiedchurch.com with the information we gave you earlier. Just covering my butt there.
I love it.
All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks for being with us today. This has been Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones reminding you, if you want to go, if you want to do something, I don't know, if you want to reach ones nobody's reaching, you need to go where nobody's going and do what nobody's doing.
Is this Pete Mitchell? This is Nigel calling for Pete Mitchell. Pete, it's Nigel. Please call me back. It's important that I speak with you, Pete.
Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planter Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planter Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplanterpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planter Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplantermagazine.com.